pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. The talk is entitled Places of Influence, Understanding and Preserving the Environment of a Writer with Karen M. Gravel. And uh, Karen Gravel she works with Lord Eck, Sargent, Planning and Design. She's a historic preservation architect practicing in Atlanta. She serves as the principal, the director of historic preservation, and chair of the governing board for the company. She is a Kentucky native, having graduated with a degree in history from Center College in Danville, Kentucky, before earning her Master of Architecture with Georgia Tech. She has been working on old buildings for the last 25 years, including several projects for Georgia College and State University, including the campus preservation plan in 2005, the Hill House, which is on the Andalusia Farm property in 2012, Ennis Hall, which is the art building in 2014, beautiful. Terrell Hall, a more recent 2020, gorgeous. If you haven't been into Terrell Hall since the renovation, it's just fabulous, as well as exterior improvements to the old governor's mansion. So a lot of experience with Georgia College, and we're really excited to hear her thoughts, her assessment, and see her photographs of the newly received property, the Cline Florencourt Mansion on Green Street. And Georgia College is so grateful for the generosity of the family in donating this really important historic property. So without further ado, Karen Gravel.
Thank you, Katie. I'm going to now share my screen. I can see this. Can everybody see it? Yes? Okay, great.
Yeah, let's see.
Thank you so much for having me. It truly is an honor to have seen this house at the time that it came into the hands of Georgia College. And I was so excited. I know the last time I spoke about this was in September of 2024. And it was just, I couldn't express the excitement to be able to go in the house, and there was so much there. It was so much intact. But I'm gonna walk through what historic preservation architects do and touch on a couple of things that we worked on related to Flannery surroundings in Milledgeville, and then take a tour of the house. I think it wasn't really open to many people, and so it's kind of a new discovery for writers and historians and academics. So I'm trying to be an advocate for taking care of it as much as possible. So what does a historic preservation architect do? Katie read my resume, but actually it brings in a whole lot of skills and sensitivities. We're constantly trying to understand how a structure has evolved. As an architect, we're looking at the technical aspects, but we're also looking at the social history of it, and being very sensitive to understanding what has gone on over time and how we can bring this resource into the future in a way that it communicates how complicated and or rich the place can be. And I work on everything from writing to detailing specifications to working with contractors. So it's a very diverse a profession to be in right now. Our work is rooted in the Secretary of Interior Standards for the Preservation of Historic Structures, which has an initial credence to do no harm. I will not read all of this on the screen, but their Secretary of Interior standards are written by the National Park Service, and they're a set of guidelines that we use as our Bible on kind of internalize these treatment recommendations. We always want to make sure that we're retaining historic material, that any new use retains all the character defining features, whether it be a volume of a space or the finishes in a space. We want to be able to acknowledge that and describe for the National Park Service or for whomever the reviewers are what we're doing in a sensitive way. We want to acknowledge a resource as a record in time. That's important in knowing and understanding the development of a property. And then um, acknowledge that certain things can be significant in their own right. At the house on Green Street, there were additions to the house over time, and we want to make sure we understand the best we can what happened. And then anytime we're treating a property, we want to make sure that we're using the gentlest means possible, that we're repairing with light materials, um, that we match historic materials in their composition, color, design, and texture, and use gentlest means possible. Something other people don't think about are archaeological resources. I'm not going to present on that tonight, but there was an archaeological survey done of the whole site, which is interesting. And then what I always like to add is once it's gone, it's gone. So any treatment needs to be carefully done in a way that if you remove something, that we acknowledge that in a way that we know that it's probably not ever going to come back. So that's the mindset that we use, and that's how we go through a building. And we use certain terminology. I've tried to relate these to Georgia College because we worked on your campus so much that it and people don't understand these words a lot, but preservation really is taking care of a resource and making sure you repair it. We did this. This is happening at Andalusia Main House and Hill House. Restoration is taking something back to a period of time. Specifically, the old governor's mansion was restored back pre-Civil War, and it really represents that time period. Rehabilitation is using a resource for a new use, like Ennis and Terrell. That's you're still maintaining all your character defining features. You're still treating the materials correctly, but you are rehabilitating for a new use. And then reconstruction can be things that you're rebuilding it from documentation. And and I've always pointed to the peacock pins at Andalusian and the porches at Ennis and Terrell. We brought those back based on historic material. So these are kind of the deck of cards of treatment recommendations that we use all the time that fall under the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic structures. When it comes to thinking about Flannery, what's rich about Milledgeville is that it was her setting. And her setting was the backdrop for all these other things that affected her writing and her work. And I am by no means a Flannery O'Connor scholar, but I understand the breadth and depth of all the people that pay attention to her and her stories and knowing her stories and knowing her biography. All of these things influenced her writing. And I believe strongly that her setting was very important for her life. Back in the summer of 2024, I'm sure a lot of you went to the exhibition that was at Emory that was bringing together work from Benny Andrews, Flannery O'Connor, and Alice Walker. It was a very interesting collection around, I think, was it around Everything Arise Must Converge, I think was the theme of it, but this graphic was very helpful in boiling down Flannery's life and where she was and how she went to graduate school and she went to Yadu and then she had a trip to Europe. But I like to make the point that unlike everybody else in the world these days who travels and gets on a plane fairly frequently and has been to other parts of the world, Flannery at her time, she wasn't in a lot of places. So for me, analyzing and thinking through, well, how much time did she spend in Milledgeville? Her early life was in Savannah, but then really a large chunk of her time was in Milledgeville and both at Andalusia and the Green Street House. And I think it's super important for that to be recognized and is why this house is so important today. And her attitude, I mean, I don't know her, but from her writing, it's just interesting to think of her in Milledgeville and what she's written um, and how that influenced her writing. And so I think it's fascinating to keep studying the physical world that she was in. I have been around Flannery's work since 2004 when we worked on a master plan for Andalusia to help set some fun ability to help take care of the resources there. That was a lot of fun and introduced me to her Habit of Being that I read it then. And then later on in 2011, 12, Craig Ameson was able to earn a Save America Treasures grant. And for the Hill House, which was an important 10 house, this is what it looked like when we showed up on the scene. Um, and this is what it looked like in the 50s, around the time that she would have been there. But we were able to kind of piecemeal the the house back together. And that was a real hand-in-hand exercise with the contractors, and then being very sensitive to try to keep as much historic fabric as possible while fixing the rest of the holes and stuff. And so we just left the wood raw so that you could see what had to be fixed. But that's in the context of also working on the campus and then being invited to help think through what to do with the Green Street house. So I said I was super excited when I showed up in summer of 2024. I was even more excited when we were able to go inside, because I had never seen a resource so untouched as this. But the task was for us to write a historic structures report. And that's really kind of a basic planning document that follows a Secretary of Interior standards for preservation, Preservation Brief 43. And we like to say, whether it's an email or a working on a detail or thinking of a 300-page historic structures report or working on a preservation plan, we use the same structure. We want to talk about the history of whatever it is, being it either short or long. We want to identify a period of significance, if there is one specifically, and then describe what the resource is, analyze the condition, understand what's keeping it at risk, and then make treatment recommendations. And the treatment recommendations are from what I talked about earlier about preservation, restoration, rehabilitation, reconstruction. That's a basic format that most preservationists use when trying to think about talking about a building. So this house has an amazing history. It's one of the older houses on the block in this part of Milledgeville. It was built in about 1820. I had to go back to my notes to make sure I brushed up on that by a General John Gordon. It served as a, I wouldn't say a rental house, but the governor, there were several governors of Georgia who lived here before the governor's mansion that was built. And the governor's mansion was built kind of 90 degrees to the left of this photograph, if you don't know Milledgeville. This, what we think is a photograph of Peter Cline and Marie, I'm so, I always, Margaret Ada, his second wife, Margaret Ida Trainer. We they married. Peter Cline, from what I understand, had married two sisters, Katie and Margaret. And Katie had, I believe, 7 children, and Margaret had 9 children. And they lived in this house. And Peter Cline was a mayor of Milledgeville. He was a uh, businessman in Milledgeville. And this photograph helps us see what the house looked like before it had a fire, in which the roof line was rebuilt and later porches were added. But we can see the brick fence that is out in front, and many of the children, both in windows and on the steps. In our work, we look at what we call Sanborn maps, which are usually made by were made by the Sanborn Company to help inform fire departments about what kinds of structures were present in a city. And the Cline house is right here. If you can see, can everybody see my cursor? No? Is there any? Okay, well, I'm not sure how to see it. Down in the 1901 on the left side, there's the pink the big pink square house that says mansion. It's the old governor's mansion, and then the Cline house is to the right of that. And there were several, maybe I can annotate. There were several structures. Whoops, on the site. This is the Cline house. I haven't grown with that lately, but blown up here. You can see that the house had a porch in 1901, and then many outbuildings that have been documented with archaeological research. That might be something to have later on, Katie, as a topic of archaeology here. But let's see if I can't erase this now. Well, I'll just keep going and see if I can do that. I don't want to have big green circles on my presentation, but oops, escape. Oops. All right, let's see. Oh, there we go. I can now go back to this. Actually, let's just go forward. Okay, well, let's get, this is the eraser. Let me erase this. So we were able to go through the archives with Cassie Mullins at Andalusia, and she was able to share with us a lot of images as well as at the archives at the library. This is one of Flannery with her mother on the porch. We tend to look at details about everything in the background. That's a lovely photo of them, but just understanding what the house was like at the time. And then let's keep going. Okay, advance. Okay, oops, let's go forward. And then we have this lovely photograph, and I see Mrs. Florencourt is on the call, and she's on in this photograph, I believe. So I feel very um, self-conscious about showing this now, but this is a lovely photograph of Flannery with her cousins on the porch at the Green Street house that we think is there. And then this is a photo of Flannery with other family members. It is a little blurry, and I would love to understand who all of these people are, but have only made a guess on a couple of the folks in this image. But I think it touches on a topic of how the house was used by the family to help house a lot of family members, and imagining all of the upstairs and downstairs rooms being filled with family. This is Flannery in the backyard with one of her peafowl, and Ennis Hall in the background, and one of the structures that I don't think is there anymore, but it's just a fascinating glimpse of her at that age. From what we understand, this would be approximate period of significance for the house when it had the extended porches on the front. Those show up in several photographs from the 40s when Flannery was there. And I believe she and her mother and her father moved back in 1938. I'm sure someone can correct me if I'm wrong on the call, but they were here at this time. And then we've got images of Flannery in front of the cabinets that held china. And then this is one of my all-time favorite photos. It's just an amazing photo showing her personality and as a schoolgirl at that time. And then later we see the building still with all the porches. And then there's been some other photographs from the 80s that have helped us understand what was there later on. And then when those porches came off the house during some structural problems. And then we just use all this evidence to help piece together a history of the house. For example, I think those sashes may be the original ones, but the ones that are on the house don't have any evidence of green paint. So I'm guessing that the sashes were probably replaced at some point. Some people may say, well, what does that matter? And it just matters in understanding if you have historic fabric left or not. So what another part of our job is to really think through the developmental history of a house to be able to lay it out for clients. And so these are diagrams that start with the 1820s and move all the way through to the 1996 when there were improvements made to the rear of the house to have a ramp. But This is just an analytical tool for helping people understand a historic structure. I'd like to point out that in the 1939, I remember we read something about every time somebody would move in, sister or Dutch's sister would like add another bathroom, and it's very evident on the second floor of the house that bathrooms were added over time and added to spaces to help make it more comfortable. And so the next part of our work is really understanding what the condition of the house is and what are those things that are going to kill the house and what are the natural elements that are and what are they doing to the house. And so it's not in great shape. There's a lot of damage on the siding. I've been helping Georgia College do some basic repairs to help button up the exterior envelope so that there's no critters, no water, no pests trying to keep people from breaking into the house so that we can arrest some of this deterioration while there's planning involved to move it forward. But there's some serious holes that we've identified and tried to help kind of move that forward in a positive way. I'll just look at the exterior. There's a lot of rot on the gate post. We're also looking to make sure we corroborate theories around the developmental history of the house. But since these pictures were taken, Georgia College has taken steps to get the vegetation and the trees off of the house as well, which is good because those are always hot conduits for squirrels to get on the roof. This is what we think is a former kitchen. Also included whatever remaining outbuildings were there. So when you go into the house, again, I can't understate how shocked I was to see the amount of historic fabric, the amount of plaster walls that only had one or two layers of paint, the furniture, the belongings, I feel like it seemed like a pretty well kept moment in time or moment for lots of people. If they could see this, it would be a great kind of resource. This is one of the front parlor rooms that had a piano. We had a lot of actually below this room, there was some damage on the foundation that is fairly stable now, but there's a lot of plaster cracking in some of these rooms. And so we had a structural engineer come and make sure that there wasn't anything that needed to be done immediately. But there are issues that need to be fixed once there's a plan forward. No immediate danger, but we've well documented all of the rooms. This is the front hall. As you come into the building, lots of details such as the light fixtures that are amazing to see. The other front room with a lot of furniture and pictures and just lamps and accessories, just amazing collection of stuff. I think all of this is being slowly cataloged too by Georgia College. And so I sounded the alarm that this all needed to be cataloged and people needed time to go through it carefully and document where things were. And yeah, the main hall, there's a lot of stories, I think, to be told with the beaded board, and it helps kind of date different parts of the project. I think a lot of this came in the early 1900s after there was a fire in the house. And so when you see a lot of this beaded board going over top of certain things, and then you see a change to a different kind of beaded board upstairs, you can see where they tried to keep the design moving forward. But it's obviously a different material. So there's not a lot of paint layers here, but certainly interesting to see. Great character defining features. Every bit of this house is one big character defining feature, I tell people, because it's just all a part of it. and then restrooms and lived-in spaces on the first floor. And then this room to me seems like a paramount room for ripe for research. It was just a dining room that, as we understand, Sunday dinners were held, and I think just the how it was kept with the dark, clear finishes and the furniture, and there's various pieces in here, and imagining there being Sunday dinner after church on Sunday, just as a interesting place gathering. There's all kinds of just interesting details everywhere. And then the lived-in spaces. This is towards the back of the space, and that was where Mrs. Florencourt lived, which was good. Just this is where, in the part of being an historic preservation architect, you feel like a caretaker and trying to make sure that we understand the importance of the life of this house and how it's evolved over time. This very lovely room, kind of a breakfast room. And this is Florencourt's bedroom, bathrooms, dresses were there. As we go upstairs, I mentioned that the upstairs had several different bedrooms, and each bedroom had their own sink. And then these bathrooms were added over time, and it felt like a boarding house, but yet a family boarding house. And Flannery and her parents had a whole what people would call today suite, with the addition of a wall and a kind of small kitchen and bathroom in that area. I was obsessed with the beaded board, but you can see the different eras of that and trying to piece together when things came in and out. This is the main hallway looking to the rear of the house, with the stairs that go up to the attic space. And then, from what I understand, Regina and Edward's room, this was a much larger bedroom that was next to Flannery's bedroom. But there was all kinds of resources there. Notice the sink on the left, and just interesting collection of stuff that you can imagine interpreted later will be just super interesting for all kinds of archivists and historians. We were able to date some of those sinks and toilets to the 30s, which corroborated the idea of them coming along um, at a certain time. There were a couple of missing sinks. I'm not quite sure where they went, but these were very simple spaces with a tub and a toilet, normally with the sink just in the room. And then Flannery's room, it appears that from all I can tell, this is all the furniture that was in the house with her. I was there probably in December, helping look at some repairs to the house, and this furniture was still there. But imagining Flannery in school and living in this house with all of these adults, um, to me is just a fascinating concept. And then to see it all together and thinking about it not having heat or cooling. And this is the hallway that connects the Regina and Edward's room on the end. It comes down to we're right behind us is a like a small bathroom that this tub has been pulled out of because the floor was failing in that room. And then to the right is a room Flannery was in, or at least that's how we understand it. And I'm advocating for whatever happens to the house that this piece be um, maintained as closely as to where it is today. This appeared to be a small area for kitchen items on a sink and a small ice box. At least that's what my grandmother would call it. And then larger rooms for others. And more bedrooms. just a massive house with a lot of bedrooms. And then this is an image too of the the piece of wall with the white paint on it. That too is another bathroom that was added, and you can tell by the beadboard down at the bottom and the different kind of doors. Those were inserted over time. And then different rooms. Let me understand. This contains a lot of Bernard's artifacts. I don't know exactly if this was his room. Um, but could be not. But a lot of things point to him. And then another bathroom added in with these tubs. I can only imagine these people carrying tubs up the stairs and trying to get them set in these smaller bedrooms. And then the great attic. The house was cooled with a ceiling fan. There was this great high skylight in the top of the attic, and I mean, we've been told that Flannery would like to come up here and paint. Again, this was loaded with artifacts and interesting memorabilia, but the space itself with the skylight is pretty incredible. It's hot in the summer for sure, but just an interesting place. And then all this tiny details throughout the whole house is just fascinating to watch and see. I'm sure these are all being hopefully cataloged somehow and just as a record in time and how that may or may not have affected her worldview. And that's all I have for a presentation, but I'm happy to go back or talk if anybody wants to have any discussion items or questions.